I have pleasure in opening the council meeting of the 9th of September 2025 at 6 p.m. and welcome all those in attendance. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and to pay my respects to elders past and present, acknowledging that as the City of Vincent, we have a role to play in working towards reconciliation and justice for First Nations people. Now, I have received an apology from Councillor Ashley LaFontaine tonight, and I've got two councillors who are on approved leave of absence. That's Councillor Warner and Councillor Wallace, and I note that the rest of you are here. So yay, we've got quorum. Well done. So I'm going to go straight into public question time. Hello to those members of the public who've joined us tonight. Can I just get an indication if you wish to speak to the meeting? Okay, so you just need to come forward, say your name, the suburb you reside in. If you're speaking to an agenda item tonight, then just tell us and we will put that first on the agenda. You've got 3 minutes to speak to the meeting. And if you don't want to be live streamed, just tell us and we can turn it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening to the councillors and to the Mayor and to the executive leadership team and to the public who are watching online. My name is Greg Johnson. The agenda item tonight is 9.1 on which I wish to speak, and I have the property affected, which is at 143 Scarborough Beach Road, Mount Hawthorn. This is an issue which the council would be aware of from the briefing meeting in which I attended. Firstly, I'd like to thank those councillors who responded to my correspondence and my emails and phone contacts. Thanks very much, including Susan Warner, who's away on leave, and I do appreciate that. I do appreciate the courtesy that you've shown in responding to a ratepayer, which is the role of councillors. In respect of this matter, as you're aware, it's a change of use, which is a bit of a misnomer in the sense that the use for which the hotel already has is for packaged takeaway liquor. The hotel can already sell packaged liquor. So there is no change of use in that sense. In the practical sense, there is a change in use of the property though, which is the planning issue. And that's the issue that I think the council needs to be on top of. My question is this: does this change of use meet the planning vision for the city? Does it add any more amenity to the city than what we don't already have? Now, in this change of use, the major effect from a planning point of view is it takes away the existing hotel accommodation, which is the only hotel accommodation left in the city of Vincent. It's deteriorated and old, but it's not to say that it can't be renovated, thereby leaving the city with an existing status that provides for tourists who come into our city. That's the first question. The second question, is it part of the planning strategy to see an amenity of this kind reduced? And the third question I'd like to ask is this reducing opportunity, not creating opportunity? We need the opportunity to create a better place in the city of Vincent, more particularly in Mount Hawthorn, which is deteriorating very rapidly. So they're the three questions I'd like the council to discuss. I'd like to hear from councillors on this issue. It's a strategic issue and a very important one. Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to address the meeting?
Good evening, Mayor Zaman and councillors. Leslie Flory, 79 Sass Ave, Mount Hawthorn. I have a large 900mm active stormwater pipe running through my property to Lake Munga. This was located by myself, City of Vincent asset. City of Vincent saying that they have no record of it, however they knew about the pipe. I'd like an update on the GHD survey data and mapping of the stormwater drainage in the City of Vincent as per the Drainage Technical Memorandum, December 2022. Has all the data and mapping been completed? Has this been made available to residents? Has the State Records Office been updated, and if so, when? Have any of the affected people with stormwater drains running through and under their property been advised? We know there is approximately 50. If so, how many and under what circumstances was this information provided that they have stormwater pipes running under and through their properties? At the council meeting held on the 8th of April 2025, I formally requested information regarding the total expenditure on the small underground stormwater storage system and infiltration system installed at Menzies Park. Specifically, I asked for the cost, including the system itself, installation, groundworks, turf replacement and associated labour cost. To date, I have not received a response. I respectfully ask again, can this information be provided? In addition, I'm seeking the following information regarding drainage maintenance at Menzies. What were the dates in 2025 that the council cleaned the drains around Menzies Park? When was the drain located on Menzies Park Oval next to the playground last cleaned? For the 2024 calendar year, what was the total amount paid to contractors for drain cleaning works at Menzies Park? And as a matter of public interest, I would like to request information, one, regarding the number of properties that have been UV lined, works completed since the UV lining was carried out on my property. And number two, if any such works have been undertaken, I ask that you also provide the total cost of these works. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the meeting?
Good evening all. Mary Cropley, 40 Vincent Street, Mount Lawley. I'm speaking to item 9.2, the proposed changes to the hall, which is adjacent to the Sacred Heart Church and School. My neighbour and I have both made representation through submissions, but I just wanted to, I guess, drill it down to asking you all to give it, before we're voting, to give it more scrutiny. They're not proposing to do up the exterior in any way. I believe if this was a residential renovation, the council would expect them, that owner, to do something with the exterior, exterior aesthetics, and that's not happening here. And this is an opportunity to let it blend in with our neighbourhood rather than stand out, which it currently does. And also importantly, this facility at the moment doesn't have an existing approval for what it's doing. It got an approval for 3 to 5 years, like 12 years ago, and nothing, as far as we know, has been requested to extend that usage. And also, we've raised the issue about the car park beside the hall. We've been told that it's not relevant to this, but we believe that it is relevant because the application makes reference about the usage of that car park for when the staff are using the hall, they're using that car park. So therefore it is linked, and that car park also doesn't have an approval, and it also has an outstanding landscaping approval. So just highlighting again and urge you all to have a look at it closely. Thank you.
Thanks very much. I can't actually see around the TV, so I can't see if there's anybody else that may want to present. Sorry. Okay. Does anyone else wish to present to the meeting? Okay, so what will happen is there will be a summary of your remarks will be included in the minutes, and if you've asked questions, that will also be included and available for next month's agenda. So, and also the items that you have discussed, which is 9.1 and 9.2, are going to be brought forward on the agenda and discussed first. So there being no further questions, I close public question time at 6:08. Governance Manager, could you please confirm if any written statements were received?
Through you, Mayor Simon, we have received written questions from Glenn Christie of Mount Lawley in relation to item 9.2 and written statements from Dudley Meyer of Highgate in relation to item 9.4. These have been circulated to council members and a response to each question will be provided in the October council agenda. Thanks.
Okay, so I haven't received any applications for leave of absence, so I'll just check tonight. Do any councillors wish to make application? Okay, so moving on, we don't have any petitions, deputations or presentations, so I'm going to move to the confirmation of the last lot of minutes, and that's that the minutes of the ordinary meeting held on the 12th of August 2025 be confirmed. Do I have a mover for that? So that's moved Councillor Wolf, seconded by Councillor Castle. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Moving on. Okay, so I do want to make some statements as the presiding member. As we know, last year the WAPC finally made the decision to move the temporary batching plants out of North Claysbrook. This was done by imposing a number of time-limited approvals and requirements to give certainty to developers and the community and to council that they were finally, after years and years and years, going to go, and that they were not going to be able to continue to their temporary approval at the sites. In an utterly predictable move, Heidelberg and Wholesome appealed a number of the conditions, specifically the requirement to remove all of the structures and to remediate the land. And Heidelberg also sought to amend the orders to enable them to begin concrete batching at the ungodly hour of 3 a.m. The decision by the WA Planning Commission to support Wholesome and Heidelberg's proposed changes in relation to noise decommissioning and remediation is incredibly disappointing. Removing the conditions to fully decommission and decontaminate the sites means that in many ways we are back to square one, and the decisions now run the serious risk of continuing to sterilise the sites, and it could derail any future development. The retention of these structures means that no remediation of any contamination on site is going to occur as part of the conditions, and even worse, nor can the extent of any contamination which exists on site or may exist on site even be ascertained. So from a market perspective, what confidence can any interested buyer or developer have as to what costs they will potentially be up for if they decide that they want to purchase the land? So I maintain that Heidelberg and Wholesome should be held accountable for making the sites safe for development following their long-awaited departure in 2027. And this would mean that you need to ensure appropriate decommissioning and remediation of the site. But of course, the WAPC decision was exactly what the companies wanted. They're not remotely serious about doing everything possible to sell the land and to move on. In fact, at the WAPC hearing, they pretty much let the cat out of the bag when they sought to revisit the same tired old arguments about why they simply had to remain in the middle of the city. And this was as part of the argument as to why they also had to extend their operating hours to be able to commence at 3 a.m, despite the fact that they live directly across the road from a number of residents. Fortunately, one of the commissioners picked up on this and asked them that as they're meant to be gone in 2027, surely they'd already worked out their alternative business arrangements. The answer is, of course they have, but their commentary revealed what we all know, and that is that they're holding out to stay and continue to enjoy the ill-earned market advantage that they have over their competitors by remaining in an area where their operations are prohibited. These multinational companies are using whatever means possible to remain in this prime inner city location at the expense of much needed high density development right next to the city. So Vincent, the state government and the WAPC will never be able to achieve the density that we are all wanting within the North Claysbrook precinct and ensure that it's being redeveloped in line with the planning framework. Now, people know I have been pushing for many years for the plants to be moved so that the area can flourish into an urban community and so that we can ensure that we have high density diverse housing and improve the employment opportunities and make sure that we have got developments that are in line with our desired planning framework. I would say that this saga has been the most critical planning issue we've faced over the past few years, and residents and businesses continue to suffer from the impacts of these plants, and if they don't go, this will be indefinite. Fortunately, Heidelberg were unsuccessful in getting approval to start operating at 3 a.m, but I have every confidence that this is being appealed. So I don't have any confidence that the concrete batching plants have any intention of leaving. I feel that they're on a pathway to attempt to land bank, and I'm going to be continuing to urge the state government to pursue compulsory acquisition of the sites, because it might be the only way we will ever get them out. CEO, do you have any declarations of interest that have been declared?
So declarations of interest have been received, Mayor Simon. Thank you.
Are there any declarations of interest from any councillors? Okay, so the items which are going to be brought forward are obviously 9.1 and 9.2. We do have a little thin agenda being in caretaker mode at the moment. So I'm just going to see what other items people might want to discuss. Councillor Castle, Councillor Greer, Councillor Alexander, Councillor Wolf.
12.1, please. Thank you, Mayor.
12.1. And Councillor Hallett.
13.1.
13.1. Okay, then, so they were the ones that I wanted to discuss as well. We are looking at passing potentially on block 9.3, 9.4, 11.1, 11.2, 11. And 11.3. You got that as well? So do you want to read that out?
Yes, so through you, Mayor Simon, the en bloc items listed will be 9.3, 9.4, 11.1, 11.2, 11.3.
Okay, do we have a mover that we move to be en bloc? Moved to Councillor Castle, seconded Councillor Hallett. All those in favour? Okay, that's moved. It's carried unanimously. Okay, so now we're going to move to 9.1, and that's number 141 Scarborough Beach Road, Mount Hawthorn, proposed change of use from hotel to tavern. Do we have a mover for this? Moved by Councillor Castle, seconded by Councillor Greer. Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of questions before I speak to it. Just picking up on the questions from the gallery. In determining this, sorry, I'm just finding my notes. In determining this particular application, I'm just wondering about what role or what consideration council has to have around this change of use, adding or reducing the amenity in the area.
Through Mayor Simon, we do need to consider what the impact of the amenity to the surrounding neighbourhood would be from the tavern use. That's consistent with the objectives of the district centre zone and matters under clause 67 of the planning regulations relevant to this assessment. In saying that, there's also some weighting that we need to consider to the history of the site and how the site has operated as a hotel for a substantial period of time. So you'll see in the officer report, we've balanced that. We've still considered noise assessments and the intensity of the site, as well as considering how the history of the site plays into that, noting that the proposal doesn't seek to increase the intensity of the existing hotel, which will remain as per the previous approval, and how they have operated for well over about 15 years now at that capacity.
Thank you. And I'm just wondering if you could perhaps speak to how that works when you're talking about it in the negative. So in this situation, we're talking about the loss of a particular element of this use and how that plays into the determination on amenity.
Through Mayor Simon, essentially when considering an entirely new use, we haven't essentially considered the loss of the accommodation specifically. What we've considered is the new use and how that responds to the relevant objectives of the zone. In this particular instance, the accommodation is being removed, so they won't be providing that at all, but they aren't providing any internal works to remove that floor. It will just be left vacant. There's a couple of offices and a couple of storage areas, but they could reinstate that in the future. So essentially what we've considered and what is before us is considering the appropriateness of a tavern use specifically and how that responds to the planning framework. What we can't consider is what is a potentially better option. We have to be considering what is before us, and that is a tavern use, and that includes no provision for accommodation.
Thank you. And I am wondering though about our strategies and instruments that might include the provision of accommodation in town centres, and whether that is a consideration that we can take into account, and if so, then how is that played into the assessment?
Through Mesamon, so in reviewing our strategy, as well as that feeds into the objectives of the district centre zone under our scheme, but looking at the strategy first, Mount Hawthorn is designated as a town centre and one of our key activity centres, and that identifies tourism opportunities, entertainment, accommodation, hospitality, cafes, restaurants, etc. In considering that as well, the accommodation component is ideally what we do want to see in our town centres and our activity centres, etc., such as Mount Hawthorn. But ultimately, in considering a tavern use, which is what is before us, it still does meet that strategic vision for our town centre and specifically Mount Hawthorn, in that it's providing that continuous hospitality venue, and also noting that there is a range of other residential accommodation types and short stay accommodation within the Mount Hawthorn broader area as well. So we're satisfied that it would continue to meet those objectives.
Thank you for those clarifications. Look, I do take the point that's been raised in the gallery, and I think there's some really important considerations for council in how we would like our town centres to operate. But in this case, I don't think there's much scope for council to refuse this change of use application. What we're talking about is a technical change to reflect what is the current operations of a business that has been operating for over 90 years. While I do understand that concern about removing the accommodation option in terms of the current use, it's not something that's currently being provided. And I believe, although I know in the report it references not being provided since 2022, I believe it's a lot longer than that, than it's been provided in any material form. So I don't think it is removing an amenity that Mount Hawthorn has been enjoying for some time. I am conscious that accommodation is something we need to think about. Having just passed a short-term rental accommodation strategy last month, we're really tightening those options for people, and so that's certainly something that needs to be considered in future planning strategies. I also take note of the answers that when you're looking at this sort of change of use, we don't have the ability under the planning legislation to consider what might have been or what opportunities might be lost by approving one application that is before us. And so on that basis, I'm supportive of the officer recommendation, and I think that what we will see as a result of this is effectively no change to how the PADO operates.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mesman. I've also got a few questions, many of which Councillor Castle has already addressed very kindly. Thank you. But I did just want to touch on some of the concerns that have been raised throughout the week regarding the accommodation section of the building being considered heritage. Just curious around if administration has been given any information about the future of the accommodation section of the venue, and particularly just concern around it going into disrepair. Thanks.
Through you, Mesamon, so the State Heritage Council did flag it as a potential heritage listing, and that is still, I guess, flagged on their system. I believe they did undertake an assessment a few years ago and ultimately had decided not to put it on the state heritage list at this time. And that's really reflective of the significant modifications that have been made to the establishment over the years, removing, stripping away some of the key heritage significance that once existed. So no, there isn't any heritage significance at a state level for those internal walls and such upstairs. In terms of what's planned for that area, there is no plans. They are just going to keep it as is. It is in quite significant disrepair, and the applicant has flagged that there would be a significant financial outlay to bring it up to code and up to standard to actually rent it out. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And just on that, is there a role for the council in ensuring that section of the building doesn't deteriorate further?
Through you, Mayor Zamon, no, there wouldn't be a mechanism. When we do essentially for the tavern use, we will need to do a new occupancy permit, which will inspect the building as constructed at that stage, but ultimately it's their responsibility to keep it up to standards.
Through you, Mayor Simon, I'll just add that if the building did go into disrepair and that was brought to our attention, there are mechanisms under the Building Act for us to serve orders for that to be rectified if it becomes a safety or structural issue.
Thank you very much. I just also, in the gallery, there was some concerns relating to how this decision relates to the vision, our vision for Mount Hawthorn. I just wanted to give administration an opportunity to comment on how you see this change impacting what we see as the future of Mount Hawthorn.
Through you, Mayor Zamon, yeah, sure. I probably would echo some of the comments I started with in response to Councillor Castle's question. But ultimately, where our assessment has fallen is that the tavern use still is consistent with the objectives for our district centre zone, and specifically within the Mount Hawthorn town centre. Some of those key objectives is really around high quality, pedestrian friendly, street orientated developments within the district centre that enhance public interaction, levels of accessibility, diversity of uses, range of employment opportunities, and then to encourage the retention and promotion of restaurants, cafes and entertainment. So that's a little bit of a snapshot, but ultimately we consider it's a long-standing establishment that contributes significantly to the Mount Hawthorn town centre, and the change of use wouldn't impact that and would continue those positive outcomes in line with that vision.
Excellent, thank you. And one more question. What would happen if this wasn't approved today? What would the consequence be for the business or for the council?
Through Mayor Zamon, they would stay with their hotel land use. I believe at that stage there'd be no implication from a planning perspective. They could continue operating, but they would have issues with their liquor license because Racing Gaming Liquor have ordered them to change to a tavern license. So there would be a few options there for them. They would likely appeal this decision through the State Administrative Tribunal to reconsider our planning decision, and that's really due to the fact that it's not an option for them to convert to a hotel or to remain on a hotel liquor license due to the financial implications of bringing the accommodation up to scratch.
Great, thank you. Thank you for answering all of my questions so fulsomely. I think overall on this item, personally, I'm quite disappointed to see the loss of potential hotel accommodation in the town centre. I think it would add a real value if that's something that the company would choose to do. I think we should keep people who have the joy of being tourists in Mount Hawthorn in hotel accommodations and not in residential homes. But overall, given the length of time the accommodation hasn't been provided, and I don't really see there's a very strong planning grounds to say no to this. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation. Thanks.
Anyone else wish to speak to this item? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for all the questions and responses that we've heard tonight. That's been incredibly helpful. I certainly do understand the concerns that have been raised by the community on this item, people do care about how venues affect our business growth and tourism opportunities and the social health of our neighbourhood, and that's very important. But as we've heard tonight and at the briefing, not all of the factors that have been raised are matters that we can weigh up in this decision. So in weighing up everything that we have heard both tonight and last week, and considering it from the planning perspective, I too am quite sad to see that loss of accommodation. But from the planning perspective, to me, this application is acceptable. And some of the factors that I considered strongly in this are that no works are proposed, there are no changes to the patron numbers or intensity, no extension of trading hours, and we're not going to be seeing a loss of patron parking. And as we previously discussed, there's no introduction of a new ability to sell packaged liquor. So in that sense, to me, the change is administrative in nature, and it's the practical and technical next step required because the accommodation will not be reinstated. And seeking forced continuation of the accommodation isn't something that would be within the city's remit. The paddo itself has been part of our community since 1932, I read in the report and learnt that. And this proposal will preserve its operations and a continuous hospitality use in the town centre. So I do support the officer recommendation.
Does any other councillor wish to speak to this item? Okay, I wanted to make a few comments myself. Look, I really appreciate the concerns which have been raised from the gallery and also in correspondence in relation to this item. I think there's from a range of principles, there's some shared agreement, and I suspect all the councillors feel the same way, and that is that we would much prefer to see the accommodation component kept within the city, and it is. I do note that we've just done a bit of a clampdown on unhosted short-term residential accommodation, so it makes it all the more important that we do have those alternatives available for people as well. And I also agreed with the sentiments that were echoed around the potential proliferation of packaged alcohol facilities, and I would concur with the statements which were made that we've got plenty and we really don't need to look at creating any further. So then it comes down for me looking at what is actually being proposed and what is, as has already been said, what is within our remit in terms of what we can actually contemplate. And the other thing is the literal cost of what it means to potentially refuse this. So I note that in terms of the provision of packaged alcohol, any change makes no difference in terms of what can potentially be offered at the paddo. That if there's any suggestion about changing the building itself in order to accommodate some sort of drive-through arrangement, that will be a significant planning decision that would actually have to come back. I don't suspect it would be a very popular one at all with locals, and so that is not something that we can contemplate even at this point anyway. And so it really does become about the loss of the amenity of the beds. And unfortunately, we do not have the mechanism to compel people to provide those services, even if we think, and it sounds like everyone is in agreement, that we think it's actually a really good idea and would be something that hopefully at some point in the future someone may choose to take up as an option. So I'm aware that we really don't have much scope to refuse this. We could refuse it, but that would invite, of course, an immediate appeal to the SAT. And I'm very conscious that we need to be careful with ratepayer monies. And if we know that that this is going to be appealed, because I understand that the owners of the paddo would have no choice but to do so in order to continue their operations, and we know that it's not likely to succeed, then that means that we've effectively taken a position to make a stand not at a cost. And I'm not sure that that is a responsible use of ratepayer funds. I would rather see that money reinvested into our footpaths, which people know is one of my primary concerns. So I will be supporting the officer recommendation as well, but I think there is merit, and it's something I'd like to pursue for a future workshop, in looking at ways in which the council can encourage the provision of accommodation options within the City of Vincent as a whole. And I think it does need to be looked at also in light of other recent decisions that we've made. But it's certainly my hope that with passing this resolution, that we won't see any actual changes to function in the city, in the Mount Hawthorn precinct to what we're seeing at the moment. But I agree that we need to keep a pretty close eye on these sorts of developments, because we don't want to have destruction of the town centre by stealth, and that would of course be a concern. So, Councillor Castle, is there anything you wish to say in conclusion? I'm going to put the proposal. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Thank you. So now I'm going to move on to the next item, and that's 9.2, and that's number 42 Mary Street, Highgate, proposed alterations and additions to place of worship. Do we have a mover for this motion? Moved by Councillor Greer, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Ms. Mon. I would also like to start with a few questions. It was quite alarming to read of the compliance issues that were raised by the community through this process, particularly relating to the provision of trees and the landscaping requirements. I was just hoping that administration could speak to the actions that have been taken as a result of that.
Through you, Mesamon. So just to be very clear, the compliance matters relating, I'll start with the subject site, there are none. So as it relates to the subject site, which is where the hall and the church is located, the development that exists on site is compliant with the previous approval that was issued in 2007. So that approval was actually issued in perpetuity. So there was no time limited condition on that. So that still stands. The reference to the trees, landscaping, and the time limited approval of car parking actually relates to a completely separate site at 197 Harold Street. And that doesn't have any bearing or relationship to the subject site or the consideration of this application. But in saying that, through the public questions we did receive, it did come to our attention that that was a time limited approval as a temporary car park that was issued after this one in 2009. So when that was brought to our attention last week, our compliance team have now commenced investigating those issues, and that's the time limited approval, which has since lapsed. And they'll also consider the trees and landscaping and determine next steps.
Thank you. So just to confirm that the action's been commenced from here, and it'll either come back to council or through administration, depending on what's appropriate.
Through you, Mesamon, yes, that's commenced, and we can give you an update as that progresses. Yeah.
Yep, thank you. My next question just goes to the comments that were raised tonight regarding the physical structure and how it will appear. And there was a comment there, if this was a residential home, it would be held to a higher standard than what's presented. I was just hoping administration could make some comments on the difference if this was a residential home compared to what's being proposed.
Yeah, sure. Through Mesamon, so a similar assessment has been undertaken against our built form policy, but also our heritage policy, which guides the development for commercial properties within the residential zone, but also those properties such as this that have that heritage protection. So in considering that, and as detailed in our report, ultimately we're satisfied that the overall built form, as well as the materials and finishes, appropriately reflect traditional elements of the existing building and how that relates to the heritage precinct, but as well as considering the context of Harold Street and Vincent Street, which are largely residential, and that we're still satisfied that the setbacks provided and the overall design is appropriate against those policy provisions and objectives. We've also referred this to the State Heritage Office, which was supported by them unconditionally, as well as our design review panel member who specialises in heritage architecture. And one of the key components they look at is the context and character of the surrounding area the aesthetics of the proposal, the bulk and scale landscaping, and really covers all those 10 principles of good design under our state planning framework. So that was ultimately supported by the design review panel in terms of the overall scale, bulk, colours and materials, and how that fits into the surrounding context as well.
Thank you. I think that is all of my questions. I did just want to say a thank you for the community for advocating on this matter. It's certainly a complex site with a lot of history, and I think it's been excellent that the community have raised with us their concerns and that we're taking seriously the perhaps the compliance matters that have been raised. I really do share the community's concerns about the impact of the bulk and scale of this site. I think for a tight-knit community around there, it is an eyesore, and hopefully as we progress through this process, people will be mindful of the impact on the community. All of that said, I'm struggling to find a planning reason to deny the application. So I'll be supporting the officer's recommendation, but certainly feeling for the community in terms of how the rules are written that enable us to support or reject this proposal. Last comment to say, I am really pleased to see that in that building we have got a big focus on improving accessibility of the venue. That was pleasing to see through there. Thanks.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, many thanks to the community members who've taken significant time and effort to ask questions about this proposal with the aim of ensuring that any changes are respectful to the neighbourhood. And it's evident that a lot of research went into those questions as well. And thank you to administration for the responses provided. Echoing the previous comments about looking at this purely from a planning perspective and taking into account those considerations that are valid planning considerations, to me, I do support the officer recommendation. The application is before us because the site is heritage protected, and from that purely planning perspective, I believe that the works proposed are acceptable, and I'll provide my reasoning for that. That is because the demolition is limited to the non-original structures, the facade and the heritage significance remain intact, and the addition is consistent with the existing building materials, which doesn't obstruct the views of the church itself. I do note, as we've heard, that the design review panel member, who is a heritage specialist, supported the proposal by way of all green ratings, and the proposal had support provided by the Heritage Office as well. To me, it's also important to consider what the proposal actually provides in terms of use, and it's supporting the continued use of the site by the Sacred Heart community, providing that dedicated archive and office space so that it can function effectively into the future. So on that basis, whilst I absolutely do hear some of those concerns raised while looking at it purely from that planning lens, I do support the officer recommendation. But wanted to lastly thank the community as well for raising those concerns around the adjacent sites and those compliance matters in terms of the time-limited approval, the trees and the landscaping, and was really pleased to hear the response from administration tonight that compliance work is underway, and appreciate that council will be kept in the loop on how that progresses. Thank you very much.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this item? Councillor Castle. Sorry. Okay, Councillor Hallett.
Thank you. Just a question and quick comment. From the public gallery, there was a comment around this could have been an opportunity to upgrade other aspects of the facade, and wondering if admin can comment on whether that is actually within our power to request that they do other works as well.
Through you, Ms. Amon, in short, no, it's not. We have to consider what they've put forward before us, and that is the scope of the application. We can't require them to make changes elsewhere if that's not part of their scope of works. That's your question. Sorry.
Thank you. I concur with the other comments. I guess I think there's sometimes a tension also with heritage places and keeping consistency with adaptive reuse and sustainable redevelopment. And alignment with the existing site, and then also street character as well. And I think that I think where it's landed is what it is. I think it is defendable for the applicant. I don't think that we could reject it on planning grounds. And I think that's kind of just inevitable with that particular that building. So I will be supporting the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Castle.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I feel very similarly to other councillors and will be supporting. I think this is in some ways similar to our previous item. We're talking about missed opportunities of what we might like to see in a site and what we would have hoped that the applicant had done and brought to council, but unfortunately that's not within our power to consider that. I just want to acknowledge that from the community's point of view, the planning processes at council and at other levels can be very frustrating. And I do understand that it is difficult when you are seeing a situation, a site where there is other examples of non-compliance to have concerns about what an applicant is going to do in relation to this particular application. And it is disturbing and upsetting when council hears about that, although as others have said, thank you for the action that's happened already to address that. Unfortunately, with the framework that we have, that's not something that we can consider when dealing with the particular application before us. But I just wanted to acknowledge that can seem very unfair. I did have one question, and there was a comment in the gallery raised about the dependency of this application on the car parking. And while I understand that we are dealing with the single application before us and not the others, I just wondered if you could comment on applications where there is a level of interdependency between other users on the site, and where one application might rely on a service or a element that's provided somewhere else, but that other portion of the site is subject to other applications or other non-compliances, and how that is sort of plays into our determination. So that's like a very convoluted way to ask that question.
Through Mesamon, I'll try to answer that. Generally, when we're making planning decisions, we avoid that at all costs, and that's what has occurred in this instance, that when you're making a decision on an application, it is party to one particular development site, or it may expand across multiple sites, and there would be a mechanism for us to tie them together, such as a requirement to amalgamate the sites, or there might be some other kind of legal instrument to do so that in the future that's safeguarded. So generally that doesn't come up unless there's formal agreements through reciprocal parking arrangements or things like that. And how that plays into this particular site is that they have always been treated very separately. I will say that the temporary car park next door, while they weren't legally tied to each other, that was provided as surplus parking for the subject site, and there was a condition of approval on there to say that it should be used for the place of worship, but they weren't tied to each other.
Thank you. I think that's probably just an observation for future considerations of our frameworks, that we have a way of tracking where those dependencies have been taken into consideration. And I think probably what happens more often is that dependency is on something that's provided by council. So it's parking in a town centre, it's parking beside a park, it's somewhere else that has been taken into consideration, perhaps to reduce the amount of parking required for an application. But we do need to make sure we have a way of tracking that and ensuring that 5 years down the track, that other piece of land that was relied upon doesn't have a new use. So just a thought bubble for the future. Perhaps I will direct that to the acting CEO.
Noted through Mayor Zaman. My comment would be to elaborate on the response from administration already. There are car parking standards for land uses that is enshrined in whether it's in our planning policies or at state level, and this is for residential, all types of areas. So there are associated car parking standards, and where they are not met, then they can be varied. That's just permitted through the planning framework. That would be documented in any report to council, and you would have full visibility of that, and objectives will need to be assessed against. So there are prescribed standards that needs to be provided on site. Sure, there could be some shortfalls in circumstances, but that is all discretion, and that's all captured as part of the planning process. So though it sometimes could seem and appear that these things may not be well tracked or documented, as per this example, there are conditions of approval, and that's exactly what the proponent is required to comply with in terms of the terms of those approvals.
Councillor Greer, do you wish to say anything? Do you wish to say anything in conclusion? Okay, so I'm going to put the proposal. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried unanimously. Thank you. So now we move on to the next item, which is 12.1, which is the information bulletin. Do we have a mover for this item? So that's moved Councillor Wolfe. Do we have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Hallett. Councillor Wolfe.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one question around the register of SAT appeals regarding the refurbishment application for the Angrove Street petrol station, please. The report says that the preliminary hearing concluded on the 22nd of July and a decision is expected by the end of October 2025. I did attend the preliminary hearing at the SAT, at which Judge Jackson said that he had another case coming up that was important and time consuming, and given that he was hoping to provide a decision by September. So I was just wondering if further information had been received or something had changed, because I know the community is on edge counting down how many days are left in September, expecting a decision to be made. Thanks.
Mazamon, no update. In short, the SAT has 90 days to provide its decision. So my understanding was that what Judge Jackson had said was an indication of other commitments and I suppose the earliest that a decision could be expected. But with the hearing being at the end of July, I suppose the timeframe would be 90 days from the end of that point.
That makes complete sense. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hallett, did you want to say anything? Okay, does anyone else wish to speak to this item? Okay, I'm going to put the item. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. And then we move on to the final item, which is 13.1, which is a notice of motion, which has been presented. That's plant-based food systems. Do we have a mover? It's moved by Councillor Hallett and seconded by myself, because I'm allowed to. Councillor Hallett.
Thank you, Mayor. So this, councillors may recall from last council meeting, we talked about the advertising process for the Sustainable Environment Strategy, and there was a number of submissions from community around incorporating plant-based treaty into the SES. At the time, in some of those discussions at the briefing, administration had said that there was a great opportunity to integrate it into the Climate Transition Action Plan, and the impact of greenhouse gas emissions would be central to that. And then some of our deliberations talked about the role that food systems and plant-based and animal agriculture, the impact that they have goes beyond emissions to other areas of environment and sustainability, whether that was water management, food waste, production, and as well as intersections with public health. And so administration very kindly put in briefing notes some adjustments to the SES to include some mention of it. And there was some discussion around the public health plan as well. And so I guess this motion is really mostly to codify or formalise that direction. And so thank you, administration, for your very detailed and supportive commentary on the motion. But essentially it's to incorporate, I guess, some broader thinking around food systems, which when we're talking about climate change and sustainability, we often do focus on transport and energy, quite rightly. But food systems often get missed out of the conversation, and they're an integral part of both climate mitigation and adaptation. So I'm hoping you would support this, and essentially it's requesting that the principles of the treaty can be investigated through different areas of the city plans. And so that intersection between the SES, the Climate Action Plan, the Public Health Plan provide opportunities to synthesise some of those agendas. Thank you.
I'm happy to second this motion, and I thank Councillor Hallett for having brought it forward. As we did discuss as we previously discussed the environmental strategy, this is something which has been brought forward as a suggestion from a number of our residents who have seen this as an obvious opportunity to be able to supplement the work that we're doing in terms of climate change mitigation. And as we've also discussed, is also part of what can constitute our public health plan as well. And so there's a number of, it ticks a number of boxes for us to be looking at this. I think it is important that we look at every lever that is available to us as local government to try to address both in terms of mitigation and adaptation, the effects of climate change. And this is a logical one that we need to look at, particularly when you look at the degree of emissions that come from this particular sector, which is absolutely significant. So thank you very much, Councillor Hallett, for bringing this forward. I think it's an important one for us to be supporting, and I think that as it's crafted, it is not an overly onerous one, but sends a very clear message as well in terms of an additional tool in our tool belt. Does anyone else wish to speak to this item? Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Mayor Zaman. Mostly to lead out and thank Councillor Hallett and yourself, Mayor Zaman, for putting this forward. As we've shared, I think the climate crisis is at the forefront of the minds of our community. Our community are expecting us to pull every lever that we can. So I think our community will be really pleased to see the city progress this, and I'm really pleased to support it. Thank you for bringing it forward. In researching tonight, I've very much enjoyed reading the innovative ways that different councils and cities across the world have put this into action in so many different forms. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the ways that our plans and strategies can work towards the goal of the plant-based treaty too.
Anyone else? Councillor Alexander.
I won't be supporting this. I don't think a local council is set up to advise people what they eat and what they don't eat. And only part of that is in here, but it is in here. And I think it's a step too far.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this item? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm pleased to support the motion. Thank you very much, Mayor Zaman and Councillor Hallett, for bringing it forward. I think at the local government level, we've long talked about food choices in terms of their contribution to society and our community's well-being, but less so in terms of the commitment and the role to climate change. And plant-based food options certainly give us the opportunity to action both. To me, this is not at all about telling people what they can and what they can't eat. This first step is an investigation into ways that we can bring in these principles, and that's in recognition that as local government, we have an influence in the choices that we provide and in the choices that we promote and in the choices that we normalise. So to me, it's the same as what we're doing in the wellbeing space. It's also a strategically aligned motion in terms of what we're trying to do at the broader strategic level in Vincent, and does send that really important message that we take sustainability seriously and we're looking at all available levers to action our fight in the sustainability space. So I strongly support this motion.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this item? Councillor Hallett, is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion? I'm going to put this, all this in favour. Okay, against? Okay, so that's carried with Councillor Alexander voting against. Okay, so there being no further business to conduct, I thank all those in attendance and on the live stream, and I close the meeting at 6:57.